Welcome to the Neo Operational Video Series for Software version 3.7. These videos are designed for targeted instruction to get you up to speed quickly and simply. This video targets block queues. Now, block queues are a very important tool, especially for a programmer or line designer who likes to use tracking. In fact, one cannot fully take advantage of tracking without using a block queue. So there are two different kinds of blocks, and we want to talk about both of them. So the first one is a standard block or a block queue. Some people call it a full block, some people a hard block. A traditional block queue puts a hard instruction on every patched channel in the show file. And what that does is stop any tracked values from earlier queues from tracking into or through the blocked queue. So that's a hard block. I've got a few queues here that I've sort of pre-recorded. Let's just sort of take a look at them. Q1 is going to bring up my warm fronts to full. Q2 brings up my cool fronts to full. Notice my LEDs 101 through 110 have marked or prepared themselves. We know that from the orange text in the attribute window. So they prepared themselves for needing to be used in Q3. So we hit go and the LEDs come on in Q3, and then in Q4 I've got 21 through 29 that come on. So what I'm going to do is now create a fade to black queue, and we're going to make that a block. So I'm going to say select active, and that's going to grab every active channel. I'm going to say out, that'll turn them all off. I'm going to hit record, and that's going to create a fade to black queue, Q5. And I'm now going to say queue. I could say the queue number, but since we're in the queue that I want to adjust, I don't have to. Now I'm going to hit the block key, and it says Q5 block, enter. And there we now see a couple of things. Number one, we have a flag in our sidebar on Q5 that says it's a block queue. And number two, if you look at all your channels, the channels now have a hard 0. So the ones that already had an instruction and that are going to a different level from the previous queue, those are all the green values. Those are going to be green because in Q4 they have a level, so the green indicates they are going down. But everything else has a hard 0, meaning that there's an instruction there. Tracking cannot get into or through that. And the reason why it's white is because it has no level in the previous queue, so it couldn't show you a value going up, which would be blue, or a value going down, which would be green. So how might we use this block queue? Well, we're going to go back to Q1, and we're going to add some more channels. We're going to say 31 through 39 at full, and we're going to update, and we know this is going to track because if we look in our sidebar in our yellow text, this is tracking mode. So I'm going to hit update, and now when I hit go, those values are going to be there in tracked, and I'm going to run into Q3, and everything else is normal. We've just have 31 through 39 added. And now there we are in Q4, and now when I hit go, 31 through 39 are going to go out. And again, the block queue is what stopped them from going any further. One of the things to understand about a block queue is if I go into patch, and we're going to add a new channel, 114, and I can see that 103 is available, so I'm going to say 114 at 103 and patch that up. We're going to go live. We're going to say yes to save this. And just do understand that there is no blocked value on channel 114 because the block was placed before that channel was added. So if I go to Q1 and I add 114 to full and update, if we roll through these queues, I'll just roll through them quickly. Notice 114 is there, it's not affected by the block. So do understand that's both a a limitation and a feature depending on how one could take advantage of it. Now that we have a queue that's a block queue, let's talk about removing the block or getting rid of that. So I'm soaking in Q5. We want to take the block off of Q5. So I'm going to say Q. Again, I could hit the Q number, but since I'm soaking in the Q, I don't have to. And then I do Shift block, and that says unblock, enter. And that turns that back into a traditional track through queue rather than a block. So that's the way to go through the process of getting rid of the block. Okay, now we're going to talk about Smart Block. Smart Block is a different version of a block queue. This is an intensity only block that is calculated at the playback. It only applies to the channels that are used in the queue list. So there's a lot to talk about here. Number one, an intensity only block. That means if we track attributes, attributes will track through the smart block. So that can be a very intelligent way to deal with LEDs and moving lights when programming. Number two, it's calculated on the playback, meaning that it doesn't put hard data in the queue the way a hard block does, but when you play back the queue, it has this smart block flag, and it takes a look at the data that's in that queue list, and it provides a hard level to intensities only for that. The other advantage is the fact that since it only applies this to channels used in the queue list, this is now easy to block just a certain set of channels based upon the queue list when you are programming in a multiple queue list environment. So let's talk a moment about what we're going to do is make, I've sort of cleaned up these queues a little bit from the demonstration of a block queue. So currently there is no LED information in this 5 queue sequence, so there's nothing here in the show file. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab Q5 and make it a smart block. So I'm going to say Q. Again, I don't have to hit the 5. I'm going to hit block, which says hard block. I'm going to hit the block key again, and that goes to smart block. And I'm going to say enter. Now, if we look at our queue list in the sidebar, we'll see we have a tag that says smart block. And I'm going to go back to Q1. I'm going to grab my LEDs, 101 through enter. We're going to put them at full, and what I'm going to do is provide a color. I just spun blue out. So now we're going to update this. We are updating to track. I know that because of the yellow text above my queue list. So we're going to hit go, and it's going to run in Q2. Go, running Q3. Hit go, running Q4. And now when we run Q5, notice because it is a block, the intensities will go back out, so this has maintained its state of a blackout queue. However, because it's a smart block, it left the attributes exactly where they were. So this can be a smarter version for you when you're dealing with LEDs and moving lights, so that you don't have all of the parameters of your lights going back to the default state. Thanks for watching this Neo operational video for software version 3.7. Go to the Philip Strand website at www.strandlighting.com for many more videos on Neo programming and operation.